Power is a crown forged in whispers, but sometimes that crown sits upon a man who cannot rule even his own bedchamber. 13 years, 13 cold winters, and a queen, untouched. What happens when a kingdom depends on a man who cannot give it an heir? This is not just the story of a king. This is the story of a throne without warmth, of a bed without legacy, and of a queen who remained a bride, but never a wife. His name was Louis XII of France. The world saw a monarch. The court saw a husband. But history remembers him as something else. The year was 1498. France, heavy with expectation, had a new king. Louis was crowned with silver hair and the weight of age already bending his spine. But the realm demanded not just a ruler, it demanded a future, and futures are born in the royal bed. The pressure was immediate. Louis needed a wife, but not just any wife, a queen who could secure a dynasty. And so, the crown turned toward a woman of beauty, ambition, and royal blood. Anne of Brittany, widow of the late king, and the only woman to ever wear France's crown twice. But beneath the silk and ceremony, a secret festered. Louis was no warrior, no virile prince. He was an old man with a failing body and a whispered curse, a king who could not perform the single act his crown demanded most: to give France an heir. In royal France, a marriage was not just a bond, it was a battlefield. Every night in that vast stone palace, the battlefield remained silent, and the queen, radiant and unbroken, waited for a war that never came. The court whispered, the church waited, and the midwives, the doctors, the astrologers, they all leaned into the same unspoken truth. There was no child, no heir, no sign that there ever would be. For 13 long years, the queen's chamber remained a quiet tomb for royal expectation. She grew older, so did he, and the throne grew colder with every silent night. But this was more than personal tragedy. It was a national danger. Without an heir, every duke, every prince, every scheming noble could smell the blood of a dying dynasty. The palace had become a cage. Louis clung to his crown as his body failed him. He prayed, he begged, he pretended, but the truth, brutal and relentless, sat beside him every night like a ghost. The impotent king. And the queen, she became a living relic, the virgin bride of a dying monarch. She smiled at court, dined with nobles, rode through the gardens. But in the dark, behind locked doors, she was just another prisoner of a king's shame. In a royal court, silence is a weapon. For 13 years, France's grand palace was filled with it. No cries of newborns, no royal celebrations, only the soft rustle of gossip, moving like smoke through cold corridors. They said the queen was barren. They said God had cursed her womb. But behind locked chamber doors, the truth was far crueler. It was not the queen who carried the curse. It was the king. The king's condition was whispered among a chosen few, physicians, confessors, and the most trusted servants. In public, Louis stood tall, but in private, his trembling hands could not hold the weight of legacy. The church, ever hungry for divine explanation, called it God's trial. The nobles, always watching, saw something else, an opportunity. Without an heir, the crown was a prize waiting to be stolen. Louis could not give the queen a child, but he could give the court a lie. The royal physicians were sworn to silence. The confessor burned records, and the palace scribes wrote carefully crafted fictions of hopeful expectations that never came. Month after month, the same charade repeated. The queen may be expecting. A royal heir will come soon. But the cradle remained empty, and the kingdom waited for a ghost. For the queen, this lie was a dagger wrapped in silk. Her people pitied her, her enemies mocked her. And in the royal court, her worth was measured in the children she could not bear, because the man beside her could not try. Some queens plotted against their kings, but Anne, she endured, because to expose the king's weakness was to set fire to the entire throne. Yet power, like rot, spreads quietly. Nobles began to choose sides, courtiers aligned with younger claimants, and every passing year without a child tightened the noose around Louis's fragile reign. Yet to protect his dignity, Louis withdrew deeper into the palace. His public appearances grew rare, his health worse, and the queen, she became the beautiful mask of a broken monarchy. By the 12th year, the whispers had become prophecy. France will have no heir. And when the last winter came, the court no longer waited for a royal cry. They waited for the king's last breath. Every throne has a heartbeat, and when that heartbeat weakens, the vultures begin to circle. In the final months of Louis XII of France's life, the royal palace no longer belonged to the king. It belonged to the waiting. The king's illness was no secret anymore. The whispers that once lived in corners now filled every hall. Servants carried trays with trembling hands. Priests waited with their holy oil. And the queen, she stood like a marble statue beside a dying man who was never truly her husband. For 13 years, his silence had ruled her life. Now, the silence prepared to bury him. France had no heir. The line was about to break. Outside the palace walls, a different kind of storm gathered. Ambitious nobles, young, hungry, and bold, whispered of who would take the throne. The king's death was not feared. It was anticipated. On the night before the new year of 1515, the palace fell silent once more. No prayers could heal what time had already taken. Louis took his last breath, alone in the company of his shame, and the crown he wore became the inheritance of another man. They called him king in life, but in death, he was remembered by another name, the Impotent King, a title carved not by enemies, but by history itself. For Anne of Brittany, freedom came too late. She had worn the crown, she had smiled at the feasts, she had endured the silence, but she left the throne, as she came to it, untouched. France would move on, another king would rule, but this story, a throne without an heir, a queen without a lover, a king without a legacy, remained burned into the stone of history. Power is nothing without the pulse of legacy, and sometimes the loudest kings leave behind only silence. But beneath the golden emblems of a powerful crown, there lingered a silence so loud it echoed through generations. A king without touch, a queen without consummation, a nation built on whispers instead of heirs. Every feast, every parade, every church sermon was a stage, and the king, a man who ruled not with passion, but with performance. Behind jeweled rings and scripted smiles, there was only absence. Power, after all, is a fragile illusion, and what the world did not see, it invented. From bedchambers to throne rooms, rumor became scripture, and scripture became history. History remembers the wars, the treaties, the crowns, but it never forgets the silences that shape empires. Louis XII wore his silence like a shroud, and even now, if you listen closely, you can hear the echo of a throne that waited for an heir who never came. History still whispers, if we dare to listen.